Well, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, Dr. Ken Ford, for your hospitality and an invitation, and I thank all of you for coming tonight. I start off apologizing because I've got so much to say. I hope I don't take too long to say it, but what I don't come here as is someone from another city with specific ideas about your beautiful and wonderful place. Rather, I come to you as obviously, as you are, you wouldn't be here, as a fellow citizen of America that understands that the future of our country depends upon beautiful and livable cities. And I seek to talk tonight about that by using examples of what we've done in Charleston, not for their specific value, but, you know, when we're working on something hard, we need reinforcement, whatever it is. And it is hard work, the building and rebuilding and restoring the American city. I come here as a fellow practitioner of you, of your mayors, and all of you in working hard to make our city more beautiful and livable. Charleston is an old American city, not as old as Pensacola, actually, and a city that was built before the automobile and the elevator, a city of extraordinary human scale, and a city that like Pensacola, didn't really participate in the Industrial Revolution. So when the 20th century dawned, we had wonderful buildings of earlier time with beautiful detail and scale. And the city mothers and fathers had the wisdom to begin preserving them, started the preservation movement in America. But Charleston is not a theme park. It's not preordained. It's like every American city, opportunity for great success and failures. This was a failure. It was a demolition of the historic Charleston Hotel, built by a nation's first architect, where the Democratic Convention of 1860 was held. It was demolished in the 50s because the city leaders knew to be a great city, you had to have a drive-in motel. There was no great city in America without a drive-in motel. So our challenge has been, as it must be, to first of all not make any mistakes in the process. We started with the poor sections of a town, the challenge of vacant lots. We had a lot of vacant lots. We wanted to build handsome, affordable housing. This is what houses look like in Charleston. Their frame addressed the sidewalk. But this is what they built in the 50s and 60s for affordable housing. Ugly as sin, bore no relationship to the surroundings, and usually they would put a cyclone fence around it so you would think it was unsafe and wouldn't want to live there to begin with. So I was determined to build beautiful affordable housing. We had an architectural competition, picked a young architect, and that's what he designed. It worked. It fit. Didn't cost any more than the ugly stuff. Well, luckily, we had that reaffirming experience when the Housing Authority got a grant for new housing project. Now, this was many years ago. And they said, no, we got the grant, new project, 152 units, no, just where to put them. And I said, we're not building any more projects. And they said, you're crazy, you're going to get impeached. We got all these poor people. I said, no, we're going to build public housing. But we're not going to do this anymore. It didn't work. It ignored all accumulated lessons of Western civilization for the last 750 years about neighborhood and human beings and how they relate to each other. Build these brick monoliths, put a bunch of poor people in there, and then act surprised it doesn't work. I said, we're going to scatter new public housing throughout the city. Well, they thought I was crazy, but they agreed reluctantly. Then we started finding the sites, which is an interesting, discussion in the community. I mean, the average American doesn't wake up in the morning, turn to the spouse and say, honey, would it be good if we could get a little public housing next door, So we had those debates. We picked the site. Then we picked the architect, told them what we wanted. They came up with their renderings. They were ugly as sin. We fired those architects, hired some other architects, and that's what we built. Housing for very poor people, federally funded, but it blended in with the neighborhood and added to the beauty of the surroundings and wonderful places for people to live. When we were opening these, I was at a reception of the president of one of our college's homes one night, and a crush of people and a server came up to me with a tray of food, and whispered in my ear. And she said, Mayor Riley, I want to thank you. And I said, what's that for, ma'am? She says, because Monday I'm moving into 7 Marion Street. It's one of these. And she said, it's so beautiful. And I thought of all the times that mayors had been thanked for public housing. This was a long time ago. With a couple of syllables, the prospective tenant had never used the word beauty before. And the fact is, there is never any excuse to ever build anything in our cities that doesn't add to the beauty. There's no excuse, there's no reason to do anything but that. This 2-apartment home became a catalytic agent in the neighborhood across the street. These were run down. We built the public housing, put a little energy into that, helped a little bit. They got restored. There was a vacant lot next to the public housing. Market rate housing ran in there. Market rate housing ran around the corner. 1 building, 2 apartments, good urban design for very poor people, became a catalytic agent for the neighborhood. We've worked hard to keep the bulldozers out. It is hard to do. We know that. We've worked in these neighborhoods almost board by board to restore them. These are all affordable housing initiatives. And the fact is that when we do this, as you've done here, we are saving memories. You know, America is a young nation. We don't always want to be 70 years old. When we restore our neighborhoods, we give to future generations a reminder, a memory of what things were, and a sense of place and a sense of history. These neighborhoods that you could have maybe just as well said, let them go, now have become very desirable. We work hard with our affordable housing initiatives. People want to move in there, but we save them, but this with a commitment to historic preservation. This was done by one of our nonprofits we helped create before and after. You see, it looks so nice. I went by after we had the ceremonial ribbon cutting and took these pictures because I love the thought of a person of modest resources having a 3rd-story piazza overlooking the 19th century roofscapes of our city. These are called Freedmen's Cottages. They're 1-story Charleston houses, we call them, that were built by African Americans after the Civil War when they could first legally own land. Hurricane Hugo came through. It was a rundown neighborhood anyway. We could have easily bulldozed them. We knew we couldn't. We shouldn't. We worked with nonprofits and restored them, saved the neighborhood, but that building type taught us something. We were looking for a new building type for transitional housing. People moving out of our shelter for the homeless, have a little money but can't mainstream. So inspired by that, a young architect designed this. We won an AIA award for that. We won an award from the President of the United States for a scattered site public housing. Things that so often we could say, well, gee, it's just housing for poor people or somebody just gotten out of a shelter. We made them beautiful, and not only were we recognized for it, but it inspired our city. Now, this was one that was admittedly in pretty bad shape. The building official called me one day. He said, Mayor, we got to let 175 Fishman come down. I said, no, we don't. He said, Mayor, it's shifting. And the utility pole is vertical. And I said, well, we can fix that up. He said, Mayor, it's going to fall in the house next door and kill the people. I said, well, not if we move them out. He said, what do you mean? So we put them in the Howard Johnson. They had never stayed in the Howard Johnson before. Swimming pool and all like that. We put some money in there, found a developer, and rather than that, corner lot, it became that, affordable housing, little office on the 1st floor, and that saved a neighborhood. You know, corners are very important. You let them go, and that virus spreads, doesn't it? And then it catches the next one. That's really saved the neighborhood. These were owned by the Medical University. They were building a parking garage. They wanted to tear them down. We got them to give them to us, moved them to a little corner lot there. And on this little stub street, I'd never noticed much before, restored them for affordable housing. Now, this next picture I took from that top balcony closest to you, and it was a really neat street, I noticed, because it had this tree growing out of the street. Not the sidewalk, the street. You know, kind of defiance of traffic engineering. It was going out of the street. And I really liked that tree. But it, unfortunately, had this terrible looking house on it. I called up, people said, we need to buy 15.5 Cracker Street. The building official called and said, Mayor, here you want 15.5 Cracker, it can't be saved. I said, let's go take a look at it. He said, Mayor, it's going to fall on us and kill us this time. And you can't quite see it, but the utility box had become structural. You couldn't take it off. But we put some money and restored it affordable housing. When we did that, when that little ribbon cutting lady came up to me, she said, Mayor Riley, I want to thank you. And I said, what's that for? She said, because it used to be people asked me where I lived, and I was embarrassed to tell them because Cracker Street was so ugly. She said, now I can't wait for people to ask me where I live because everybody knows. And nice is, we make sure that any affordable housing, anything we put money into has to go to design review. Any affordable housing, this is done by nonprofits, corner vacant lot, terrible, awful thing. Houses next door, awful, good urban design, mentally ill people live there, not institution, they get some medicine, need a little help. Looks like single houses, got a little entrance right there, goes in the courtyard, challenged population, difficult site, good urban design, has become restroom neighborhood. I really ought to take the slide out because it looks like an institution. That's just on a crosstown highway, but that's affordable housing for unwed mothers and their little babies. Worked with one of our nonprofits. We won an AIA award for that, very contemporary affordable housing. I have a design review committee. Nothing that the citizens can see gets built without the design review committee approval. This is addition to our Board of Architecture. Nothing, no bench, no wall, no radius of curb, nothing that the city builds gets done without the approval of design review to make sure that we have a good handle on its beauty. Well, this is our downtown, which is a great challenge for all of us. This is what it looked like in the 70s. When I was a child, it was a shopping center, Lower South Carolina, and then it died, just like all have, and we've worked so hard to restore it. Now, people would reasonably say, what's the deal? You know, why is that so important? And it's not the jobs that's important. It's not the tax base that's important. The reason it's important is that is the public realm. That's the part of our community that everyone owns, the richest and the poorest. We cannot allow America to increasingly resort only to private zones. We need to increasingly have things we share together. That's what a downtown is. It belongs to everyone. And when we invest and we work and we struggle and we strain and all that we do to help restore our downtown, it's because we're giving each other a civic zone, a democratic space where our sense of community is underscored and reaffirmed, and that's why we have to work so hard on it. We did the plan, what it used to look like. We put money into old buildings like that, looked like the Dickens, wouldn't let them tear them down, apartments on the second and third floor, shops on the first floor, old Swartz building, looked like the Dickens, put some money in it, looked great. Hurricane Hugo knocked it down, put another one in there. We were making good progress, but our big challenge was this. This was our main street was this street here, King Street. Now, let me tell you, I don't have the shakes. Anybody ever tries to hold one of these things, you can't hold them steady. Nothing wrong with me. But anyway, promise, I'm clean living jog this afternoon, but it's tough. You ought to try it. It makes you feel better. But anyway, that was King Street. Right here, when I was a child, were two department stores. They were torn down in the 60s. Big vacant lot. There's your main retail street. This is Market Street. It was coming back a little bit. What we needed to do was we needed to put the right thing there. A downtown is an ecosystem. There are lots of unintended consequences of well-meaning actions. We've got to know what we're doing. We've got to understand, and it's got to be right. And, you know, it's not like you got to, somebody said, do anything even if it's wrong, get something going, hurry up, let's get it going. That would be like taking your child to the doctor and say, doctor, our child's been crying, and we're just kind of sick and tired of it, so do some operation. It doesn't matter. Just any kind of thing you want to do. Well, we would never do that. Of course we wouldn't. But we can never do that to our cities either. We have to understand the delicate in relationships and make sure that the right thing is done. So what we had to do there was put a lot of stuff, a lot of critical mass. We had to respect the scale of the buildings because it's not a high-rise city, had to blend in, but we needed a lot of energy there. We needed to respect the market hall. We moved the street back 6 feet, insisted on retail, good urban design, good critical mass. It's been a fabulous success. Details are so important. In cities, we know in our life, last 5% detail is what's going to make or break you, right? Well, this detail is a hotel conference center, obviously. This was a conference space, pre-assembly space they wanted to put right there. Come out of the elevator, go into the pre-assembly space where you have a drink for the meetings and all like that. I said, you can't do that. And he said, why? I said, because if you put the pre-assembly space there, then on the street, you got the service area or no windows or phony windows. Well, you're not going to do that. What happened in America was this. We spent a good bit of the early and mid-20th century building new buildings where? On parking lots. And we forgot rule number one in the city, honor the street. It belongs to the public. You build something on that street, you make it beautiful, and you respect the street. But we're not going to put any phony windows there. We're going to put the pre-assembly space there. Well, they agreed it cost them a little more money, and then said it was the best thing they could have done because it was a real space. You look out on the city looks up at us, at it. There's a connection. And it's been a fabulous success. We've probably had 100 buildings restored on King Street now, on Main Street, and it's just wonderfully come back to life. Now, one Sunday after we had had a good bit of progress and this development Charleston Place had been built, I was walking up the street after church at noon on Sunday to buy out-of-town newspaper, New York Times. And I saw a fellow walking down the street towards me out of place, out of contact, because he was married, retired, lived in the suburbs, walking alone down the main street at noon on Sunday. So I approached him, I said, hi, how you doing? He said, fine. I said, what you doing here now? And he blushed a little bit like he was called upon to reveal an emotion that we men, of course, never want to do, certainly in public. And he said, well, Joe, Doris and I went to early church, and she had some chores to do, and I just, he said, I'll be honest with you. It's just so nice down here now. I like to come and park my car and walk around because I'm so proud of it. That's why the restoration of our downtowns is so important, to give all of our citizens the sense of pride in a place that they own. This was Saks Fifth Avenue. We got them to build a new department store right downtown. It was a great achievement for us, and we had great urban design work and nice storefronts on the main street and the side street, Market Street. This is catty corner across from that development I showed you, and a really nice storefront. Now, across the street was this Art Deco theater, and we bought it and did a deal and got it restored, really nice. But on the side street, it had this wall that was across from the new Saks storefronts. So in restoring that, I asked the guys, the developer, I said, can we put some storefronts in? They said, yeah, we can, but Joe, you got a narrow sidewalk there, and so we're not going to be able to do real storefronts. We have to punch some little arcades in there. I said, well, that wouldn't look good. They're dark. I mean, it doesn't work when you makeshift it. And I said, what would it take to put real storefronts? He said, you got to widen the sidewalk. I said, well, that's no problem. So I called our people. I said, we need to widen the sidewalk on Market Street. And they said, maybe you cannot widen the sidewalk. And I said, why? And they said, because if you widen the sidewalk, you have to narrow the street. And I said, well, I was good in math. I'd already figured that out. And I said, what's wrong with narrowing the street? This would be too nice. I said, what you got now? 2 11-foot lanes. I called Andres DeWine. He said you could do 7.5-foot lanes. I knew that'd be too small, maybe. I said, what if you have 2 9-foot lanes? They said, well, we studied it, sure. So they came back and showed me why you couldn't do it. If you had 9-foot lanes and a beer delivery truck was illegally parked in one moving lane of traffic, that a Greyhound bus that doesn't use that street wouldn't be able to pass it without the mirrors hitting it. And I said, what if we don't let the beer truck illegally park? You know. So we widened the sidewalk. These slides I took not very good because the light wasn't good. We got storefronts in there. We got the street lamp, parametry you can't quite see. But you know, for a good while, we would have in American City, we said, Lord have mercy, take care of that beer truck delivery. When it's the mother holding the child's hand, feeling safe and good about walking down a public space in the city. That's what's important. That's why the details are important. This was an office building, obviously was built. When the guys came to see me, they wanted to build it across from the Charleston place. And they needed a land from the city. I said, we sell the land, take the real estate committee. But I said, I want shops on the street. Well, our people aren't interested in mixed use, just office. I said, we will sell the land. So we go broke. I said, I don't want you to go broke. But why, what did William H. White say in New York in the 70s, while I was up in Madison Avenue doing so well? Every 22 feet, there's a storefront. I'm trying to get people to move from Market Street to King Street, and then I could walk past draperies or bank windows. So they put storefronts in there, and these people were having a perfectly good time till I took their picture. They wondered, why was I taking their picture? You know. But until I did, they were moving down the street, right? Looking at the storefronts. The details so important. There's a terrible fire on our upper Main Street. I thought the whole block was gone. I was there at 2:30 in the morning, as mere fog would be. And Lord have mercy, it was a miracle. And the great courage of our firefighters, they kept it to one building. That's what it looked like. Next morning, Bill Fisher called me and said, Bill, we got to let Bluestein come down. I said, no, we don't. That was the name of the building. He said, Mayor, the structural integrity is gone. It will fall into the street and kill people. And I said, well, not if we barricade the street. But if that had come down, we know what would have happened. A real rubber-filled surface parking lot, right? And that part of the Main Street was really hanging on. So we did a lot deal, bought the facade, worked with the landowner. He said he'd just go build a one-story building back. I said, Nicky, if I got a three-story facade and one-story building, everybody's going to know how stupid I am. He said, well, nobody rent. I said, you build it, we rent. City needed office space, so he built it. We rented it rather than a rubble-filled parking lot. And that one it's a resurrection ethic, you know. It all of a sudden, the community started noticing it, and now several block part of that Main Street has been saved. Parking has been such a challenge in American City. This parking garage obviously was built on a very prominent street. And I told the architect I wanted to build a parking garage that didn't look like one. He was very courteous. He said, Mayor, you do not understand about architecture. Form follows function, and a building must look like what it is. And I said, no, I read that, but we will not do that at this particular location in Charleston. And I said, I want it to look like closed shutters. He didn't want to do that. He kept sending me the renderings of the louvers coming halfway down, but the lower part where you could see the car. You had to see the car. And I sent out police photographer to take pictures of buildings with closed shutters. We finally got it worked out. Won an award from National Endowment for the Art. We got a law firm on the first floor, shops. It was very beautiful. That was at the Charleston Place, a big development I showed you. We needed to build a big parking garage. We could have knocked that stuff down. There was seedy, junky, strip joints, burned out. But we knew we couldn't. We had to save those memories. We bought the buildings, cut off the back, put the parking behind it, and then restored those to depth of 50 feet. Right now in Charleston, there'd be 250 people on that sidewalk, I promise you, right now, waiting to go in restaurants. And then we put the parking behind. But that zone in America, we have not protected that zone. That's a human zone. That's a pedestrian zone. We've given it to cars and trucks and pierced it and hardened it and set it back when you must give the citizens the opportunity in that public realm to re-engage with the buildings. There's a parking garage behind it. It's very beautiful. It's won award as well. This is a parking garage we did. We put a garden in the middle. It's a visitor center. You come in, you know it's a beautiful city. We put flowers in front of our parking lots. Big old trees. This is a new parking lot we did. People say, what's that park y'all doing? Our guy said, it ain't no park, it's a parking lot. He said, why you got all those big trees in there? He says, because we want it to be a nice parking lot, you know. No one ever said at a city you got to have a city hall, hospital, churches, ugly parking lots. You know, no one ever said that. In this parking lot, I got 2 of these planted. 15th of March, come to Charleston. Flowering peppermint peach tree. 15th of March blooming. I spend 75 cents, go in there in March just to see my flowering peppermint peach trees blooming. Our city was built on water, as your fabulous city is, and I will tell you this afternoon, I jogged down to your bay and felt that breeze come across that huge expanse, and I'm a student of cities as I should be. That is a world-class place, I will tell you. It is just extraordinary, the resource that you have. Such a wonderful opportunity. Well, Charleston had the same. The Battery was built part in the 18th, part in the 19th century. We had this opportunity. It was a burned-out old terminal. And a guy bought it, was going to build the Venice of the Southeast. Great tax base. Nice high-rise buildings, gated off, terrific. And I told him that we would prefer a public park. And he said, well, he just preferred the Venice of the Southeast. And so we said, well, we'll condemn it to make it a public park. And he called me a Hitler-like dictator. And but what we knew was that in great cities, what you do is, where you have beautiful places, you give them to the public first, and then you design them with extraordinary care and commitment, and then the private development happens next. So we did the deal. Later we worked out fine, did a land swap. We become good friends, and when we had the deed signed a couple years later, it took a good while, he told the assembled group that I reminded him of Winston Churchill. We were so much nicer than what he said before. But we started what the city used to be. So we wouldn't plop it in, you know. Make it fit. Make it feel like it was always there. Did a wonderful plan, and of course it's controversial, all that money, new park, why city need a park, property off the tax books, weird people go to parks and all like that. And we built it. That's what it looked like. That's what it looks like now. It is the most loved place in our city. Our citizens, no one in Charleston imagines Charleston without the waterfront park. It is a place of extraordinary beauty. It is a place for kids to have fun in the fountains. It is a place for people to walk in peace. You know, every park is different. It isn't necessarily easier to design the physical. That's hard. But just as hard is figuring out the park's role in the city. Every park is different. This park, we have no events, no music, no permits, no nothing. We have other places for that. This is a place for peace and repose on a very beautiful place. And people love it, and I go there every chance I get. My wife probably just finished walking there this evening, and pier for the public, fish and walk and swings. Those swings are so popular, my wife and I have only been in them on a rainy February day. They're crowded otherwise. That suits us just fine. And then the private happened behind it. We did the public. Now this is, I should have pictures because it's all built. The most expensive new housing in South Carolina is right there. That top penthouse went for many millions of dollars on a perfectly public park, just as you do here. We close our parks tonight. I saw you sign jogging through, which is great. You've got to take control, of course. And then this was a big challenge, the right thing. We got this wonderful fountain there, and we needed the right thing to go there. And one morning woke up and said, because we wanted to do residential and thought of an art gallery, so we got the RFP and required the developer, we sold the land to put an art gallery there. So we got us an art gallery. There's an exhibit in it right now. And the great thing is we're able to get the art gallery built without having to appropriate any money for it, which is always a very good thing to do, and when you can. But it's just fabulous. Now, the details are so important. We wanted a gravel path along the water's edge, just to, the crunch, just a little quieter, softer, away from the harder edge of the city. And Charleston has a wonderful pastel palette. And so the pebbles they sent me, the samples were just boring gray. And so I started a quest for the perfect gravel path. And we did 50 samples. The lady quit, told everybody I was nuts. And I almost got arrested once. I was for 2 years, I just walk around the ground looking, and I was at the Smithsonian. They just done a new garden there behind the old building, and it was beautiful gravel. And I stooped down and had an envelope and scooped some in an envelope, and the security guy started coming at me. Luckily, he weighed about 300 pounds. I was jogging like back then, got out. But anyway, we finally worked out our own recipe, and it's the prettiest gravel path in America. It's just right. Everything in our city should be just right. Now, you start an ethic, a community ethic, and then it builds. So the waterfront park that we built, that could have been the Venice of the Southeast, is right down here. Now the port is going to redevelop this and eventually move out. So we got them to do a plan. We work with them, and the plan has a guarantee of public access along the water's edge. Here, they wanted to build a high-rise hotel. We zoned it so they couldn't. Bought that and put a maritime center. And then this tall building was built for my time. Then we got the aquarium over here. I'll show you in a minute. But you couldn't get from there to there, so we worked out a deal, and we agreed to maintain their bulkhead. And so now we've got the ethic of connecting the water all around the city. That's in front of that high-rise building. Rather than, no, you can't go here, we got it open. It's from 6 in the morning till 9:30 at night. A wonderful connection from Maritime Center, and that promenade continues down up to our beautiful aquarium. Then on the other side of the peninsula, that's the Maritime Center. On the other side of the peninsula, we had just a scruffy little highway, a road, and no children. We did a plan and worked how to get the permits, highway department. It's really hard to do. I've been talking about it for years. Finally got it done. Simple thing. Looking, and people would stop me on the street and want to tell me how beautiful it was. They said, Joe, that's the prettiest thing I ever saw. And they'd say, Joe, I live out where I do. I come into town, we go and walk along. What it was the citizens realized that their citizenship had become more valuable because there was another, more beautiful element of their city that belonged to them, a simple thing. Now we're going to do the walk under, all this is uptown, under the bridges, and terminate at our new baseball park, which is beautiful, and it was hard to build and controversial. We designed it so that you see the water from the seats. When one of my opponents one year was running against me, he said, the mayor spent all that money on that ballpark, cost more than they said it would, and he never told you he had a chance for free land out on the edge of town. I said, no, it didn't, because I didn't think anybody would be interested in that, because we're not interested in the cheapest land, are we? When we build things for the citizens, put it on the finest land. You're going to build a ballpark, make it the most beautiful, and give them the most beautiful site. Now, people do not tell me about the ball games. When they want to come talk to me about it, they want to tell me about the sunset and the breeze and their grandchildren and their experience. They want to tell you about a part of the public realm that belongs, and that's the view from after you got your hot dog behind the first base. It's like an observation deck at a waterfront park. It belongs to the public. It's theirs. It's a public realm. Visioning is so important. Look, this is America. No one, we can never say, isn't it too bad, or why did, we're in control. Community visioning and knowing that we have the power to decide ourselves. This was a new bridge coming into one side of the peninsula where there had been no bridge before. So we've got a lot of new traffic and access into the peninsula, and then on the other end of this street, Calhoun Street, was going to be the aquarium. So we're going to have a lot of stuff on either end of the peninsula. Preservation organization called me one day and they said, Joe, you got a plan for Calhoun Street. You have all that development pressure. And I said, no. I felt so bad. I said, let's get to it. So we got preservation organization, neighborhood civic groups, hospitals, colleges, all along the street. That was like a visionless street. It was like an old American downtown street, kind of beat up, pockmarked, vacant stuff. And the thing is, we didn't have a vision for it. So we quickly came together and did, and working hard, and the vision was it could be a great urban boulevard with certain uses there. Luckily, we had that just in time, because friends of mine bought this typical piece of land on Calhoun Street. They were going to put the Max Sleep in, cheap motel. I said, fellas, our plan says we don't want motels there. They said, Joe, we talking cash cow. This thing's going to make so much money. I said, well, we can't put the motel. They went to city council. I won by one vote. Stopped a cheap motel. County was looking for a new place for library. We bought it, gave it to the county. Instead of a cheap motel, we got the library. Across the street was a surface parking lot, building set way back. School was going to move out of downtown. Did deal with them. City's planning department's on the top floor. School board's got the first 2 floors. School board directly across the street from the library instead of a cheap motel. Across the street from the surface parking lot. Why? Because the citizens demanded they have the opportunity to develop a vision, and they developed the vision, and it's becoming a great urban boulevard. This is a hotel right on Calhoun Street, King and Calhoun, important intersection. King is our main street. Hotel closed, went broke. College wanted it for dorm, and I told them they couldn't have it for dorm. I didn't own it, the Prudential owned it, but I told them they couldn't have it for dorm. And they said, Joe, what you got against dorms? I said, I ain't got anything against dorms. But everybody knows what this was, right? I mean, you asked a 3-year-old, a son, a little girl, what was that building once? They said, well, that was a hotel. Obviously, I was down at a hotel. So it becomes a dorm on your main street. You got a little invisible light blinking. Used to be good. Kind of didn't make it. Best they could do is do a little dorm deal with the college. And so I called Hugh McCall and I said, look, the bank's got to get involved. He was head of Bank of America. We got 7 banks. City put in money, HUD money, everything. People said, why do? And I said, because that use is so important. And we restored it, and now that building next near the hotel now looks like that. This building, it really looked like this. They were starting to reconstruct, but it was that bad. And now one of the hottest new restaurants in town. This had several empty spaces. I mean, there were no buildings. It's restored because the right use in the ecosystem, that was a place where a hotel needed to be, to spin people out, people with money to spend, people who are populating outside. One of the problems in American City is we need to get more people in using our public realm. Then this is a park right by the hotel and the Marion Square, and you see they had parking on it right there in front of the old Citadel, and it was like we really didn't know this could be so wonderful. And so we got the best planners we could, landscape architects, and invested a lot of money. And what used to be that is now that. We got rid of the parking and created a wonderful pedestrian street. Oh, I got to move the other one. The bad news is there are 2 carousels. The good news is the second one is not long as the first one. And we put a fountain. We got it up for the American Society Landscape Architects Award this year, but a very beautiful place. We spent, as we did at the Waterfront Park, money on quality details because, you know, they belong to the citizens, every citizen. You know, somebody doesn't have a fancy garden themselves, but you build a beautiful public place, that's theirs. That's their garden. We made Marion Square a public garden. That's what we did. We have farmers market going there, and arts and crafts, and wonderful celebration at Christmas time. This is just for design review. That's a building that the church needed. They wanted to tear down for Surface Park, and a prominent, relatively prominent location in the city. We said they couldn't tear it down. They got very upset. It was like if you had not parked next to church, you're not going to get to heaven. You know, you got to go around the corner. But we worked a good deal and got a new bank formed, and they restored it and found parking around the corner. It's usually a win-win if you work hard enough. This is just a little detail. This was in a moderate to low-income neighborhood of town, a park that had a cyclone fence around it. It's like all of our parks had cyclone fences. Like 50 years ago, somebody must have been in the cyclone fence business. I don't mean anything wrong, but I mean, it's like you didn't need it. So I said, let's put a detail there, like in the most historic part of our city you would see, to let the citizens know that their neighborhood is just as important. So we put this masonry wrought iron detail, and that started us working on all the fence details of all of our parks around the city, which has got to be a lot of fun. This just about visioning. This is a St. John's Hotel. They wanted to fix it up. They couldn't. It was shot, so they tore it down and built that. That's 7 stories. This is 5 stories with the same height, but that got us working on a height ordinance. And every city is different, but it's like each city figuring out its right recipe, you know. And in Charleston's right recipe, it wasn't to build tall buildings for a lot of obvious reasons, but also in medium-sized American cities, remember, one 30-story building is equal to 6 5-story buildings. And we all have, in the mid-sized American city, all these vacant spaces that would be so much nicer with a 5-story building on it. You build one 30-story building, somebody's doing real good, but then you got all these other places that don't have any energy. Anyway, the height ordinance is one of the best things that we did. This is quickly a very historic building, the Exchange Building, where we ratified the Declaration and the Constitution and all of that. And this is a street, and they paved right up to it for a parking lot years and years ago. Historic building, just wham! And they closed this little street that was right here. So we reopened the little street, and where this is right here, this pavement, we planted that live oak tree, respected the building, and then we reopened the little street that you see the beginnings of here. And people said, why'd y'all reopen that little street? And I said, well, it's a nice little street, but the main reason is because the street was there first. You know, every time we erase little things like that in our oldest cities with something larger scale unnecessarily, the hospital expands, that's one thing, but unnecessarily, we've taken a piece of our history. Alan Jacobs is a great planning professor at Berkeley, and he gives his kids a grid as a work device in class, a grid of a city. No buildings are on it. They don't know what city it is. It's just a grid, the street grid of a city. And he tells them to circle where they'd like to spend time if they were in the city. They don't know where it is. They all end up circling the same area. And it's the part of the city that has the old little streets in the alleys because it looks more interesting. It's more curious. And we reopened that little street, and the value tripled just because we gave it. But the uses are so important. This is what we call the Four Corners of Law. City Hall is right here, St. Michael's Church. This was the county state courthouse building, and the federal courthouse, I'll show you right down there. Four Corners of Law. And if you notice this building here, you see that it looks like there are about 10 windows. That's the county state courthouse. I'll show you that in just a minute. So that go down the street, look back the other way, there's a federal building. So we're very proud of it. Charleston and Four Corners law, everybody knew that. So the feds wanted a new courthouse, and they had to build a big annex that would have overwhelmed the space. And we said, you can't do that. And they said, well, then we'll move. And I said, well, if you move, we won't have the three corners of law. That wouldn't be any good. And they said, basically, if we don't get what we want, we got to go. So we worked with GSA, and it was tough. We ran around the corner, bought the old, they had a big building right there, a nice transitional zone, which cities the size of Pensacola and Charleston, we understand those zones, right? So we ran around the corner, bought the old Piggly Wiggly. It was closed, gave the back of that property so they could build a new annex tucked back. Got a little park in front of it, respects that space, nice garden. Then they had to build yet another annex, so this was years later, we got them to put it behind those historic buildings. I had to call the president on that, and I really felt bad, but the GSA just wasn't going to work it out. And so I called the president, and he called me back. I said, Mr. President, I apologize, but just, you understand Charleston, and this is a very historic place, just tell the GSA, even it costs a little more, so we worked it out. So now you enter the clerk's office, a federal courthouse, through that historic building, so you got the annex back there, went around it. Then the county, Hurricane Hugo damages their historic buildings, so they're talking about leaving the Four Corners law. I just saved the feds. We're back to three corners. And so we work with the county, and that's the federal entrance. We worked with the county and had to move some buildings, and they built a wonderful judicial center back behind the historic courthouse. And then they realized that building I showed you had actually been added onto. The original building was that size. So they took off the addition, much to their credit, and restored the original 1700s courthouse, which was the first state capitol building. And when George Washington came to Charleston in 1791, as he was going around that part of the country, he saw that and said, give me the plans, and they sent it up to him, and that was what inspired the White House. If you pull the portico out and expand the building, you see that. So now we've got the county, and they're there for good. The feds are there for good, and we've got those uses intact. And when I was speaking to county council once about it, and they had this place on the edge of town to build and lots of free, surface parking, I said, what is more important in America? The quintessence of our system is our courthouse, equal justice under law, belongs to everyone. What is more important, leaving that into the ubiquitous sea of surface parking, or coming out of a historic building into the most beautiful civic space in your city and hear 250-year-old church bells chime? Of course that's more important. It belongs to our citizens. Charleston is a small city, and we had a delicate city, and we had tourism that was seasonal. When I was a child, see Rainbow Row, the azaleas. We all know when azaleas bloom. And then it became year-round, and it was starting to overwhelm the city. That's a flowering peppermint peach tree. I took that picture, luckily, the year before Hugo. It was right around the corner from us. Hugo whacked it good, but so pretty. So we needed to manage visitation. We wanted more people to come. It was just that it needed to be on our terms, just to be clever about it. So we developed a tourism management plan, and we needed a visitor center, and so we found this old railroad complex beat up, but in the part of town that needed energy, we always got to think strategically. That's the Blue Steel building that burned. The hotel that we saved is down here, the Charleston place, about 5 blocks down. So we got the old railroad, did a deal with Norfolk Southern, got the buildings restored. Rather than that, which had been easy to tear down, looked like the Dickens and all that junk around it, is now a wonderful visitor center. People pose in front of the visitor center. They hadn't even been downtown yet because it looks so pretty. And then we wanted them to know they could walk around Charleston. Got a beautiful bus shed we designed, and I got wisteria and Confederate jasmine growing up the columns of the bus shed. It smells so good, looks so pretty, and there you go. Then we put a model of the city under glass when you come in the visitor center, so you would know you could walk it, because we wanted to get out of their car, park the car, and then use our shuttle system and go down the streets we wanted to go. When we started Tourism Management, we had 1.7 million visitors a year. Now we got 4 million visitors a year, but the pressure on the city is much less, simply because we accepted the responsibility of determining how it should work. Trees are so important. I promise you I'm almost finished. This was a parking garage we built for the new, we knew how to build beautiful parking garages. So I came up with the idea of a tree at one end of the parking garage, a tree at the other, and then across the street from the parking garage, it was on a side street, there was a surface parking lot, and we wanted to get the bank that had the parking lot to put oak trees in front of their parking lot. The bank didn't want to do that, and I was disappointed. I said, well, why not? And he said, because we'll have to restripe our lot. I said, we'll restripe it for you. They said, we lose 3 spaces. I said, no, we figured out you gain 4 because we put small car in there. They said, our people don't like small cars. And then we put $500,000 in the bank, Mayor, and on a CD. And the president called me. He said, man, our board likes that tree idea better than what I thought. So we got those trees planted. But then these good friends of mine, they're always your friends. I mean, you know, no one, the mafia doesn't come into town wanting to do something. It's your friends. It's just dealing with friends to make sure we can all achieve the highest vision. So good friends wanted to build this here. So they said they got to take the tree out during construction. I said, all right, give me $750. That's what then a new nice tree would cost. And but then it started. The engineer would come and said, Joe, you cannot put the tree back because the only place to put the utility vault. I said, find out a place for the utility vault. Then the architect comes, Joe, only place for dumpster service, tree can't put tree. I said, we're putting the tree there. I knew I could put the tree there, but I was worried about when I was no longer mayor, you know. So we had a tree planting ceremony. This was on Arbor Day, and we dedicated the tree to the site of the original wall of the city, which I don't think was exactly there. It was the best idea I could come up with. So we got this bronze mark. We put it there, dedicated to Arbor Day. It says original fortification. You feel patriotic walking by there. So that tree's not going anywhere. Now, I'll tell you something interesting. Across the street, the bank, they put the trees in. They come to see me 2 years ago. They're going to take down their building, which was a 50s building, nothing building, and put a nice new bank building. And it was a wonderful meeting. The bankers were so proud. Their young architect that designed a really nice building, he was so proud. They had a model and the site plans, and it looked great. But I didn't see my trees. And I didn't want to be a wimp at the meeting, but I didn't want to ruin the meeting, so I just politely said, what about the trees? And they looked at me kind of like, what a stupid question. And they said, Mayor, those trees are the most important part of the site. We didn't show them in the plan, but said, we actually, the second phase of our building, you will enter framed by those trees. It was like trees reluctantly planted, eventually on their own, got accorded the priority that they have. And the point is with this, one of these days, when you walk down that street this time of year, and I might be dead and gone, you'll be in shade, and there'll be birds singing, and squirrels scampering, and there'll be a breeze blowing rather than occupying a harsh place in the city. That's why trees are important. Well, this is the sidewalk we put at the waterfront park. We did the gravel on the water's edge, but we put sidewalks down near the street, and it had a good bit of this bluestone pavement. That's what the city used to put in its sidewalks, a nice slate from wherever, New England. And so we wanted to do that again, so we bought this very expensive slate. And they put it down, we don't mortar the joints in the sidewalk, just put in a sand bed. And so I was jogging one morning, I saw the new slate, and it just didn't look right. I mean, something was wrong. I was so disappointed. And what it was that they cut the slate now so precisely that it looked like some kind of ersatz patio instead of a historic sidewalk. So our people came up with this idea, and they just run the torch around the edge, and it flakes it, and it rounds it, and it doesn't discolor it, and it just looks like it should always be there. Now I show you this not because you're going to put slate sidewalks here, use brick, but this is a city worker, essentially on his hands and knees, attending to a tiny detail in his city. And that, my dear fellow citizens, is how we Americans must feel about our city. That every detail is important, that our cities are precious heirlooms handed down to us by our ancestors, and we have the responsibility to care for them and make them more beautiful than we found them. This is just my recipe for livable city. It's an art show going on, flowers blooming in a park. Didn't used to have flowers near City Hall, and kids playing, have those three things happen at the same time. Everything would be okay. In conclusion, let's say, obviously, you're so generous with your time to come here tonight. Ken's wonderful leadership in the Institute, your mayor's here. This is something we all agree about. But what about the folks, the citizens? How important is this to them? Well, this is Bo's Liquor Store. It's a really interesting liquor store run by a guy I grew up with, and it's interesting because everybody in the liquor store wears a pistol. And, it's hot in Charleston, so they don't have on jackets, so you see the pistol. So you obviously feel very safe. Charleston's a safe city anyway, but it's kind of an interesting place. They got a permit from the state somehow to wear pistols. So I went in there one day, and I approached the counter, and the guys converged, behind the counter, wanting to tell me something, like I was about to receive some information. So I nervously approached the counter. And what do these guys want to talk about? We used to have this street intersection with that asphalt, no person's land layer, and we were putting a water line down. A friend of mine sent me a note, said, Joe, while you're digging up, why don't you plant something there? So I sent that to our parks people, and they came up with that plan. So instead of this, you got this. One of those fellows leaning on his pistol said, Joe, you know what you did down there at Broad and Rutledge? I said, yeah. He said, that's the prettiest thing I ever saw. Another guy said, Joe, you know where I live, don't you? I said, yeah. He said, I drive 2 miles out of the way going home at night just to see that. That was a big oak tree y'all moved there. I said, well, we thought it'd be nice. Then another said, and you got light shining on at night. And I said, well, we thought that'd be. Then they wanted to talk about flower beds that we had planted 2 blocks from their liquor store. Then they wanted to get into how a new building that we had worked with in the city, that the architecture blended in so well with the old buildings. These guys, wearing pistols, selling liquor, wanted to talk to their mayor about beauty. Life is challenging and harsh and difficult enough, and heavens knows there's enough plastic around. Our citizens desperately want us to give them inspirational beauty in their cities. Well, if there is the public support out there, then what is the moral imperative? Why do we have to do it? We got to do it because our cities must be the place where every citizen's heart can sing. This was our waterfront park. That the first part we did, we were doing the surcharge in the land, took a couple of years, so we rebuilt this pier. It had actually not existed like that. It had been a pier at one time, but it had fallen into the harbor, and we found the old granite stones. And working on the design, I told the landscape architect we needed a railing around it. And they said, Joe, you don't need a railing. I said, what about people fall in? They said, they're not going to fall in. That's what they used to be like, and let it run out to the water. They said people probably even sit on the granite, let their legs drape over. It'll be okay. I said, all right. So we built it one morning. I was jogging by there, and I saw a fellow doing just what they said he'd do. Sitting right there, sun coming up. I knew him. I didn't disturb him. He didn't see me. I saw him a couple of weeks later. His name was Clarence Hopkins. He was an epileptic. His jaws were sweeping up in front of a filling station in shining shoes. Frequently had seizures in the downtown area. People would help him, knew how to care for him. Lived with his mother, rode a bicycle. I said, Clarence, a couple weeks later, I said, I saw you at the park the other morning. He said, yeah. I said, you go there often? He said, I go every morning. I said, why? He said, because it's so beautiful. And I love it when those ships are coming in at sunup. You see, Clarence Hopkins had never seen the wonderful day at Pensacola. He'd never seen the rocky coast of Maine, the sunset in the Pacific, our purple mountain majesties, the amber waves of grain. All he knew was his city. If he was going to be inspired by beauty in his life, it would have to be in his city. That's all he had. When we were opening the waterfront park, we were having a wonderful event. It was in May, symphony playing, sunset, thousands of people coming. And I'd been looking for Clarence and hadn't found him, seen him around. Turned out he'd had a stroke. We inquired. He was getting better. And we asked the family if he could come. They said yes. So we arranged a handicap service and brought him. He'd lost his speech. Came in a wheelchair. I didn't introduce him or anything. He had a good seat. Family wondered why we'd gone to all that trouble for Clarence. And I wanted him there because I knew he would love it. And I knew he loved the place. But I wanted him there for all of us who had worked so hard on that park for a decade. And it was very hard. I wanted us to be reminded why we built places like that. For Clarence Hopkins, when he was healthy, in his city, could get on a bicycle and go to a public park and clothe himself with peace and beauty every day. And if we work hard to make places in our cities of great beauty for the Clarence Hopkins among us, we will build great and lasting cities for everyone. Thank you very much.